Lanhee, I'll start with you here. I was just making the point to Peter that we've seen past presidents try and move more to the middle. Not the case with President Obama. More talk of tax and spend.
That's right, Trish, and that's why this budget isn't a serious proposal. Look, at the end of the day, if the president were really serious about finding room for compromise, he would have talked about issues on which there is agreement, and certainly he wouldn't have presented a proposal that increases taxes, that only really helps 1 out of every 4 middle-class families, and doesn't do the kinds of things we need to do to reach agreement with Republicans on key issues like taxes and others. So this is not a serious proposal, Trish.
You know, one of the things that you're taught in sort of basic economics, Robert, is that you want to grow the pie for everyone.
Sure.
And part of growing the pie means creating a hospitable environment for the economy. We're talking about an increase here in capital gains taxes, which means in order for people to put more money to work or to continue putting money to work, they're going to have to make that much more return because he wants it to go up to 28%. Isn't that, in fact, going to discourage investment?
Well, actually not. Let's be realistic about it. First of all, the 28% is the level it was at during the Reagan administration. And obviously, these are all negotiable items. But the point here is the top 1% that you're making reference to, they've seen their earner potential grow by 200% between 1979 and 2011, versus those in the lower bottom 20% have seen their potential grow by perhaps 40% during that period. My point simply is, this is a proposal that does put not just ideas on the table for negotiation, but many of them are based in Republican initiatives from the Heritage Foundation and Republican members of Congress. So I think what's significant about the president's proposal is that it moves us away from the sequestration standards that were a bipartisan disgrace. It sees us moving away from sequestration to start reinvesting in research and development, to reinvest, for example, in national security and early childhood education. The reality is if we're going to grow the middle class, we've got to invest in opportunities for the middle class to grow.
But I think you also want to make sure, Lanhee, that you're not discouraging the middle class from moving up the rung to the next ladder. And when you continue with this progressive income tax system and you continue to try and penalize people who are doing well, then you're penalizing success and really destroying some basic incentives, Lanhee.
There is nothing in this proposal, Trish, that promotes greater income mobility. There's nothing here that says, how do we make the middle class bigger? There's only more redistribution. And we're going back to the same failed liberal arguments from the 1960s and 1970s. Look, the reality is if we're going to make this economy work, we have to figure out how to get jobs to the middle class that allow them to see growing incomes and growing wages. And we haven't seen the median income increase in the United States since 1988. And that's a travesty.
Lanhee, to be realistic about it, if you want to see the economy work, the fact that we have unemployment now reduced to 5.6%, where your former candidate Mitt Romney said he hoped to get it by 6% by 2016. The deficit reduced at the record level since World War II. And in fact, you see the price of oil drop as it has. The point I'm making simply is there are many aspects of how this economy is growing, but we're not going to get it. We're not going to keep building it unless we, in fact, give more opportunities for the middle class to get education opportunities, to learn new trades and skills. That's why this proposal is so important. And very frankly, those used to be Republican initiatives, and now it seems to be caught up in partisanship.
You know, you may see the unemployment rate falling, but Lanhee, those aren't good jobs that people are getting. And when you look at the wages, they're just not even keeping pace, really barely, with inflation. So we may be adding jobs, but what kind of jobs are they in this environment? Not to mention, you look at the recent GDP print, things aren't as good as some had thought.
That's the key question. What kind of jobs are we adding? We've got millions of Americans that are still discouraged from looking for work. We've got lots of folks working part-time jobs that want full-time work. The reality is we have to get back to mobility. We have to figure out how to create opportunity. And the answer is not with more spending, by the way, which increases our debt load over the 75-year window. Look, this is not a serious proposal precisely because it doesn't address the problems in the economy structurally that we still see. And the biggest the biggest issue that you've alluded to already, Trish, is income mobility and wages. And we haven't seen wages increase in quite some time.
And Lanhee, how do you get there?
We get there
by providing new educational opportunities, new skills, tax credits for working families to give them out, which Paul Ryan has endorsed. My point is the mechanisms are there. The question is the political leadership and the will of the Republicans to work with the Democrats there. That's the challenge. But we know how to get there. And in fact, we've gotten there repeatedly throughout our history. We've continued to grow the middle class.
And don't don't you do that, Lanhee, through innovation and through mobility and by encouraging people to take risk? Thus, why would you increase capital gains to 28%?
Well, that's right. This budget really discourages risk-taking. It discourages investment in our economy. And frankly, look, the president's made clear what his priority here is. His priority is a negotiating tactic. That's really all this is. This budget is a negotiating tactic. There is nothing serious here. There is ground for agreement, and I agree with many Democrats that there's an opportunity here to get our infrastructure in a place where we can be successful as a country, where we can look at investing in things that make this economy better. But this budget doesn't do that. This budget says to Republicans, essentially, go take a hike. We're not serious about your priorities, and we're only serious about mine.
And you know something, Trish? The last time we heard complaints that, in fact, raising the rate to 28% or raising the rate at all was going to discourage risk-taking, we saw the stock market grow to record heights. So clearly, by raising capital gains, even modestly to the Reagan levels, is not discouraged.
If you had had a low-tax environment, Robert. But we haven't even touched on infrastructure because I've got some serious questions as to whether this is just sort of a one-shot deal and whether or not that really would amount to much for the economy.